Hello and welcome to Critical Faculty. Your host Hani Salim, and after absence of about 6 months, we're back with our very first live on the channel, tackling once again the idea of evolution, whether it's just a theory in the colloquial way, or is it an established science, and how does it um, uh, pan out when it comes to comparing it with the idea of creation. I've got just the right expert with me today to dismantle the argument and give us concrete reasons why we should think the solid theory of evolution is a fact and not just a hypothesis. G'day, Aron. How are you?
It's all right. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much. I really apologize for having to have you again to keep repeating yourself, but it seems that the world is not changing in any kind of speed.
Yeah. Well, there are a number of professional make believers who are quite determined to pretend that stories written by men somehow override the facts and evidence in the rocks and in chemistry and so on. I'm not sure why. I can't. I've asked a number of believers to explain to me, why would you want to believe something, be completely convinced of something that is not evidently true nor even possible? And I never get an answer. But they tell me that they don't believe what they say I believe, because why would they want to believe that? It doesn't matter what you want to believe. There's what's real and what isn't. And I want to know what is real. I don't want to believe what isn't. And that's where I think the whole thing comes from.
So why do you think this is still prevalent, even in advanced societies like the US, where education is available and seems to, like, I can understand that maybe in situations where countries have sort of poor health and education system. Why do you think it's still prevalent in the US?
Well, if you look at our political system, it's much the same way. People will just decide that they're going to make believe whatever they want to make believe, and it doesn't matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter what the truth is. They will give you all kinds of reasons for why they hold this position, but they're not the reasons they really hold it. Because if you address that, if you show what the reality of that is, they don't change their mind accordingly, like they would if that really was the reason they held this belief. When they tell me, keeping out of politics for the moment, if we just talk about creationism or religion or whatever, when they talk about near-death experiences, and you say, okay, well, why is it then that after 50 years of research, we still have nothing of significance? So much so that we have the people who were actually involved in the research for years, who thought that they had something there, have now more recently come away from it, realizing it's all bunk. So if these people who were doing this research, who were promoting this research once upon a time, have now come forth to say, well, there really isn't anything there after all this time, then that's not a reason that would be convincing, is it? Well, what about this? And then they bring up, well, now it's the what. It's never the concession. They don't concede this, and well, there's always what about that, because there's always going to be a what about. They're never going to tell you the real reason they believe what they do, because it has absolutely nothing to do with reason at all.
What about experts in science who, the creationism that sort of masqueraded behind science and provided something like the intelligent design, where supposedly people with PhDs come across and say, hey, we've got reasons to think evolution is not true, like complexities and irreducible complexities and things like that. What are they
boil down to? That boils down to into people with PhDs seeming to be more intelligent than your average trailer park creationist, but they're still using the same argument. Science can't explain blank, therefore magic. That's what it comes down to. I want to believe in magic. And well, they won't call it magic. Miracles. They'll call it miracles, not realizing it's the same thing. They'll call it the supernatural, not realizing it's the same thing. But they want to believe in this Magic. Blessings and curses, right? Those are magical enchantments. Water bending, necromancy, the golem spell, incantations. Leviticus 14 has an elemental spell detailed in it. There's magic all through the Bible, wizards and witches and incantations and fortune telling and all of this kind of shit. Raising the dead, transfiguration, healings, all of that shit. But they just want to believe what they want to believe. And what some people have actually come forward and confessed to me is, why does it have to be true before I believe it? Why can't I believe what I want to believe? And that's the admission. Some people we want to understand, other people don't want to understand. They want to believe. And if you try to explain reality to someone who does not want to understand, who only wants to believe, they will resist to the point of violent opposition. They don't care what the truth is. Why are you wasting my time with that? And they know that they don't care what the truth is. They know that what they believe is not the truth, because if the truth mattered to them and they were actually going to pursue the truth no matter what it is, if you prove that something they held to be true is actually wrong, they would correct their position. They say, "Oh, that's not true. Well, I'll amend my position accordingly." That's what I do, but that is not what believers do. They're going to find some excuse to keep believing anyway. They could know full well, and I've had people admit this too. Even if evolution is absolutely true, they're going to believe creationism. Full stop.
Sure.
Yep.
Look, we want to entertain the comments in below, but we'll introduce what I've found very handy of late is a type of logic. It's called abductive logic, where you have two competing hypotheses and compare them to actual data on the ground. Unlike inductive and deductive, I find this is quite interesting, especially for those who are in doubt, like Chain Minds Asylum, who's saying your evolution is magic too. You will never admit to that. So, go ahead, Aron. So if you have a look at the screen, there is a comment. Chained Minds Asylum, your evolution is magic too. You will never admit that.
No. Magic is the evocation of supernatural forces or entities to control or forecast natural events in ways that are inexplicable by science because they defy the laws of physics, meaning that they are physically impossible. That is supernatural. Evolution is entirely natural. I can prove evolution even to your satisfaction, but whenever I tell creationists that, they run from the challenge. And the few that have accepted initially realize very early into the process that I am actually going to prove this, and they don't want to accept it. So what they do is they do projection. Well, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. It takes more faith to not believe impossible nonsense than to believe impossible. No, that's ridiculous. You have faith, and you tell me there's no evidence of evolution. Wrong. No. I have evidence. You have faith. You don't have evidence. I don't have faith. Get that straight. Faith is a belief that is not based on evidence. In the context of religion, it's not a synonym of trust. Quit trying to project your own stupidity onto me. These are your problems. You deal with them. I don't have faith. Science is not magic. Natural is not supernatural. Quit projecting your shit. Deal with your shit. Address it. Apologize for it if you need to, but quit trying to project it onto me.
People seem to sort of face the final product, like you're confronted by Tesla and you go, wow, how did we come up with that? But we know that this is probably 200, 300, maybe thousands of years of evolution coming from the wheel all the way to, with incremental bits and pieces, to come to Teslas of today. And that's the human, that's sort of artificial selection. That's our endeavors to improve on things. Why do people go and say, oh, humans are so complex, and not sort of trying to understand that we've only been on the scene for a few hundred thousands of years, and it's taken almost 4 billion years for that not final product, for the interim product to look like that.
You're attempting to evaluate a position as if it was based on or even involved
Logic.
reason. Religious beliefs defy reason.
Yeah. I mean, well, how else then would you reason? I mean, if you cannot invoke logic and reason and evidence, what else can you do?
Well, there's also the misdefinition of what evidence is. Evidence is I have a magic book of fables that says all these magical things happened, and that therefore it's evidence that those things happened. No, that's the claim. That you have the story, and now we need actual facts, things we can both verify to be true. We have to both show that this is it. This is actually a thing. We agree that this is real, right? We can both show that it's real, and then the fact has to be positively indicative of or exclusively concordant with only one available option over any other. So a fact does not become evidence until it points to one, supports one, or eliminates the other option. The fact that you have a storybook, like a whole bunch of other storybooks for a whole bunch of other different religions, the fact that your storybook has your religious story in it with no basis at all is not evidence, because yes, ask a Christian whether the Bible is evidence of Jesus, and they'll say yes. Ask a Christian if the Bhagavad Gita is evidence of Lord Krishna, they'll say no. Why? Special pleading, right? If the Quran is not evidence of Allah, the Avestas of Zarathustra are not evidence of Ahura Mazda, so on. The Adi Granth is not evidence of Guru Nanak. No, you don't get to make these proclamations. The claim is not evidence of itself. That you believe it is not evidence. Because people have used that too. I know in my heart. No, you don't. You believe. And if you tell me that you believe X, fine. I don't care. But when you say X is a fact, when you start asserting X as if it's true, well, now you've got the burden of proof to be able to show that. And if you can't show it, then you don't know it.
Well, for things to become a knowledge is established in epistemology, justify true belief. So a lot of people believe in many things, but are they justified and are they true?
Well, this again was where I would be accused of believing things, which we're using a different context, a different lexicon, the same word with different definitions depending on who uses it. I don't like to use the word belief because I know how believers will misuse that. So I would have said in the past that if I believe something, it means that I think that this is most likely true or closest to the truth, but I don't know it because I can't show that it is true. But that's not how a believer believes it. A believer uses belief as in make believe. They're determined to convince themselves that this is true, regardless whether it's true or not. So that's a very different use of belief. I do not believe evolution in that sense. I understand it. I know it. I can show it. I can prove it to the believer. But the believer doesn't want to see it. So they will run. So you ever turn on the kitchen light and watch cockroaches scurry in the various places, like maybe when you were back in college or your first apartment, whatever? That's the way it is with creationists when you say, okay, well, I can prove evolution is real and true. Yeah.
So let's go back to the basics of the whole thing. I mean, the premise starts in creation with Adam and Eve. Well, it seems to be, I mean, I don't know about, what do you think if somebody was created from the rib of someone else? Is that kind of cloning?
Yeah, and you wouldn't be able to, with humans, you would not be able to clone a female with a male.
Yeah.
But that's just the beginning. Oh, God can do whatever he wants to. Well, then they're going to argue about why the universe cannot be eternal, like we say it is. Because energy will always get to a cooling point, they'll say, as if that's the argument that they think it is. But then they don't have a problem with eternal hell, does it? Why doesn't hell get cold? Well, because God can do whatever he wants. Well, if he can do whatever he wants, then why does the universe have to obey natural laws then? But again, we're not talking about people who think. We're talking about people who pretend, who fantasize, and who desperately have an emotional attachment to this make believe that they've got to pretend, because it's some I don't know how it gives them value. I don't understand how any lying about anything could somehow improve your life. I just don't get that. I
Yes. Yeah.
things are, and if things are not the way I think they are, I want to find out that I'm wrong. If you believe that I'm wrong, show me. I will thank you for showing
Yeah.
me that I'm wrong. But when believers, no, believers do not want to know that because they already know that they're wrong.
Probably they'll hate you for it. But looking at Adam and Eve and contrasting it with an established sort of an idea of a minimum founding population, can you start any viable population that is going to endure epochs with only a pair of a male female?
This is a concept that is difficult to explain to people, that there was no first man or woman, because for the same reason that there was no first person to speak French. We have Latin language 2,000
I
years
like
ago.
this. I like this analogy.
Yeah, and eventually you have people who move off to various parts of Europe, and over time Latin turns into, through a process called cladogenesis, Latin turns into Spanish over here, and then it goes on to change even further, becoming Portuguese over here, and it becomes French over here, and Romanian, and so on. And then in Italy itself, they go through a thing called anagenesis, which it starts out as Latin 2,000 years ago, and it's today Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, there was no first guy to speak Italian. It's not like the language was static for 1,000 years, and then suddenly one guy is speaking his own derivation of that and has to go find someone else to speak Italian to. Much the same way with how humans were derived from apes. We still are apes, just like French and Spanish and Romanian are still Latin languages.
Yeah.
They're not Latin itself, but they are still Latin languages. That's how we are still apes. Ducks are still birds. And you can tell me, well, a duck can't be a bird because, birds, and then you try to identify some specific bird and try to find a difference with it when you don't understand parent categories. The whole thing is, it's bewilderingly dishonest. All of it. All of the creationism stuff, all of the pseudoscience defenses, all of the apologetics, every bit of it. There's not a bit of truth to any of it. That's the thing that matters. What can you show to be true? And, well, science can't explain things I don't understand is not a thing that you can show to be true. And it wouldn't matter if you could. I get that you don't understand things because you don't want to. In some cases, and maybe you're just not smart enough to understand it, even if you did want to. But that's still not the argument you think it is.
Some believers, like this one again, Chained Minds of Solomon. I'm highlighting his. He's the person sort of not convinced with what we're saying, and he's invoking intelligence as a sign of a designer. And can we just maybe have a bit of a period of time where we is design really intelligent? Is it intelligent, or do we see a lot of issues that can only be explained through evolution?
Well, we as I said, we can demonstrate evolution, and we can show an awful lot of issues that arise because evolution is a thing that would not exist if intelligence was trying to design out these flaws. There are a whole lot of flaws and vestigial features and other such things that exist only because of evolution, and that an intelligent design does not explain. And the argument that, well, complexity, because it's so complex. Well, no, that complexity is an indication that it was a haphazard construct, that it's by blind incidental design. So it's by trial and error, by blind processes without intent. That's why these things get so incredibly, unnecessarily, overtly complicated. If you look at how, for example, if you look at how, if you go, you have to go into the advanced courses. The high school level courses will probably seem okay, but if you get into the college courses, the advanced levels, and then you start to see how what a Rube Goldberg machine this is. When you look at what is it when plants convert sunlight into energy? What is it?
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. Thank you. When you start looking at how that process, no intelligent designer would have constructed something like that.
Convoluted.
That is only the result of a series of blind accidents that happen to work at each stage, and that's what they have to build with. Yeah, a good analogy or a good description of this is when like the laryngeal nerve.
Oh, the recurrent
Yeah.
measurements. Yeah.
So you have with fish, they don't have a neck, but they have this nerve that that goes right from the heart to the head. Is short distance, but then in later animals you have a clavicle that kind of gets in the way, and so that this valve has to, or this nerve has to go around the clavicle. No, not a big deal. But as they develop longer and longer necks, well, now we've got it going from one place down around the clavicle and back up the neck again. And an intelligent designer can take a Volkswagen Beetle that was originally an air-cooled rear engine, and they can make it a water-cooled front engine, because they can just decide that they're going to do that. But evolution can't. Evolution has to take what it has and make minor adjustments, but can't change. No revisions, can't change anything. Yeah. So it's got to stay the air-cooled rear-mounted engine. There's no way around that. It can't fix that. Yeah. And that's why with the giraffe, you have this ridiculous nerve that goes all this bit of attenuation. So it's so extreme.
You know, I remember something. My first EV, electronic vehicle, the very first generation were based on the blueprint of a normal internal combustion car. And they used to have that tunnel in the back seat, you know, with the divider, and a third person couldn't sit comfortably because it was based on the blueprint of a normal car, normal diesel or petrol car. And later on, when they've started a completely brand new platform of EVs, they remove that and the back seats have become very comfortable. But imagine, we're talking about this situation has never been removed, because we know that it is very expensive in evolution to do things like that. And if you can just live with them and do with them for now, that's fine. But it shows quite clearly that, you know, that this cannot be an intelligent design. It's incremental, and if the expense of changing is very expensive, it won't happen.
One of the arguments that believers like to try to use is to get you to explain the minutia of every scientific principle to nth degree. But when it comes to, you don't know absolutely everything there is, or I don't understand everything you're saying, therefore Magic Invisible Man. Well, show me how Magic Invisible Man does fuck all. How does your magical designer exist? How does it do anything? How does it correct? How does it create anything? If you pray for something to happen and the God wants it to happen, how? How does he do that? How does he make you find your keys? How does he help you win the game? How does he prevent your girlfriend from getting pregnant when your condom broke and you prayed? Whatever it is, what does God do to change that? When your child is missing and you pray that the child will be found, okay, let's say God answered that prayer. How? What happens? Is it just that things happen, and therefore if it works out well, you credit God for it? And if things don't work out well, you come up with an excuse for why it's okay because God? And there's no reason, because this religion isn't based on reason. It doesn't even involve reason. It involves squishy feelings because you want to make believe.
Absolutely. Just a shout out to my friend Dave. You know him, Aron from Deep Drinks, and my fellow Aussie down under. Please, guys, just pay him a visit. And he does fantastic content, and such a lovely guy. He enjoys a drink while broadcasting. So many things to think about, and he said sometimes it feels like our efforts might be a bit futile especially for those who invoke faith, and faith is believing things without the need of evidence. But there are, increasing, and I'll tell you about the Muslim community now. We go on TikTok. TikTok has become a thing now where we can have live chats, and the amount of younger generation that are sort of on the fence and becoming increasingly skeptic about the religious story, and they want to know more about the evolution story. So I'm sensing there is a shift. I think there is and the zeitgeist is that you can't stop it. It is inevitable. But do you think religion or beliefs in the supernatural will sort of persist, but in a different form going forward?
What I think is that the issue is cultural. We used to hold people accountable when they would say things are true that they don't know to be true. If you say that 97.3% of people do X under whatever situation, you're just making up a statistic. We call that lying. If you say things are true that you don't know to be true, you can't show me that you know that it's true, yet you're saying it's true anyway. That's called lying. And people used to get upset about that. I remember when I was a kid, it was one of the first things that I remember about going to church was when the preacher was saying that he knows things that nobody can know, and like for example, that sandaled footprints in the Paluxy River, what he was calling sandaled footprints in the Paluxy River, were proof that those were Adam's footprints. And now, no part of that was remotely true at all. There were no sandaled footprints, and it wasn't sandals anyway. It was supposed to have been moccasins, but he didn't know how to read his own propaganda. But it wasn't even moccasins either. It was dinosaur footprints that were being misunderstood because of how they were plodding through the mud. But even if it was a moccasin, my young prepubescent self was aware that you can't see a moccasin footprint and therefore conclude that it's proof of whoever owned the moccasin. And so I said, the preacher is lying, because he is. He's saying that he knows things he doesn't know. That's what faith is all about, pretending to know things you don't know. Faith is the most dishonest position it is possible to have, and it's completely auto-deceptive.
It's the worst virtue of all. I mean, I don't know
why. It's not a virtue. It's not a virtue. It's a vice. So we're going to have a reasonable conversation with a creationist. That one of the rules that they should understand in common parlance, you don't get to say things are true unless you can show me the truth of it.
Yes.
If I say something is true, damn Skippy, I can show you how I know that. But believers can't ever. But they're still gonna say that it's true anyway, even when they can't show it. So this is just one of many of the rules that they just will not follow. Another one is the projection thing. We have our definitions. Here's the realm of definitions. If you use different definitions than I am, then you're just trying to talk past me. This is what these terms mean. It doesn't mean other things. When a scientist speaks of macroevolution, they mean the one and only process of evolution that has gotten to the point where it has produced a new species. Microevolution is the same process of evolution when it has only gotten to the point where it is subspecies or breeds or what have you. If you want to say that macroevolution is one kind of thing changing into or giving birth to another fundamentally different kind of thing, that's a straw man. That's fallacious. That is not the definition. That is not what scientists mean. You are using the words incorrectly. Fix your fuck up. But you can't do that with creationists because fuck up is what it's based on.
Let's go to sort of towards the diversity of the biological life, and the creation story is quite interesting because it seems as God think that words have intrinsic meaning. So when he was showing Adam all these species and Adam sort of giving them names, or in the Islamic story, he told Adam about their names. And we know that some organisms are named after their discoverer. it would be quite interesting to see what kind of language God used to tell Adam what these names are. And it makes you think about the whole thing. But then we go to the geology and look at the all these supporting, and I'm not going to use the word, I know you hate it, the evidences.
Yeah, let's pluralize a word that doesn't have a quantity.
Yeah, it's a collective now.
Yeah.
So it's the amount of evidence, especially with supporting sciences, not necessarily evolution, but fossil records, and we see the following: we see that stratas of Earth have a geological era they belong to, and we never, ever find a species that belong to a different era in one of the strata. So if God created all of these diversity of biological organisms at sort of the very beginning, told Adam about their names, how do we then explain the fact that they're not all mixed in everywhere together, rabbits and humans and dinosaurs? And
that is the way creationists want to pretend that it is. They want to say that all of our means of radiometric dating, every other means of non-radiometric dating, every means of showing how old anything is all completely unreliable, even when it's consistent through thousands of different locations all around the world over and over again. So if you look up a geologic map, you will see that the various places across your state, wherever you live, or whatever country you're in, you can look up the geologic map for it, and it'll show you all these different places where they've used different isotopes in different areas for, depending on what type of strata it was or what have you, but they keep showing that Permian strata, whether it's in South Africa or whether it's in West Texas or whether it's in Russia, Permian is always going to be within this certain period of time, roughly 250 million years ago, somewhere in there. Always. And it comes down to precise numbers, depending on whether it's in West Texas, it's early Permian, and in South Africa, it's late Permian. But the exposure, the area that is exposed, the way that they test it's 260 million years ago here, and a little bit older in Texas. And people are supposed to think that you've tested this now in all of these thousands of locations. Why? Because the petrochemical, petrogeology is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. They have to know what they're doing in order to find and source fossil fuels. So these maps have to be correct, and they are constantly reaffirmed, corroborated by several different isotopes, every location, all around the world, over and over again. But you're going to say that all of that is just lucky guess? And if you go, as I have, I've been to a Cretaceous site where we're doing paleontology, and we know that the fossils that we're finding, these are Cretaceous fossils. We are not going to find modern mammals. We are not going to find ancient therapsids, not in the Cretaceous area, because we know that those don't exist in this way. When I went to South Africa, spent a couple of weeks in the Karoo, now I'm exploring Permian strata. That means before the dinosaurs. So there's no mammals, no dinosaurs. You can look around all you want to, and we did. And you can bring all the creationists you want to and have them look with you. You will find temnospondyls. You will find pelycosaurs. You will find Permian therapsids. You will not find dinosaurs. You will not find birds. You will not find mammals. Good fucking luck. You're going to find what we already know lived in the Permian. And then when I went to Eocene strata in the Badlands of Wyoming, again, no dinosaurs, because this is after the dinosaurs are extinct. We don't have therapsids anymore because we've got proper mammals now. And what we're finding is horse-like rhinos and rhino-like horses, because if you get back into the Eocene, the difference between a horse and a rhino is difficult to ascertain because they're very closely related. Horses do not look like rhinos today, and rhinos do not look like horses today. But one of the properties of evolution is that the further back in time you look, the more similar these organisms will turn out to be. And so your horses end up having 3 toes. Rhinos have 3 toes. You start looking at all the other fundamental features of their structure, their physiognomy, and then they start becoming more and more the same thing. If you look at the biggest rhino ever, the Paraceratherium, it looks more like a horse than it does a rhino. It's 40 feet tall, but it still looks like a horse.
Yeah.
As opposed to a rhino. There's no horn, for example. But these creationists want to ignore all this consistency so that you could roll a handful of dice. They're okay with this, that we're doing all of these examinations, all these different strata. You roll all these dice at every one of these strata, dozens of dice for everyone, and they all come up the expected number, all of them, every time, everywhere. And creationists are okay with that because they think it's somehow less likely that things happen naturally than except that people tell tall tales and write them down in storybooks. And that's where we get lots of the old religions about gods. That's where we get the Vedic scriptures and the Bhagavad Gita and so on. We've got so many stories of Lord Krishna, way older than Jesus. Lord Krishna is already making blind see. Indra is walking on water. All of these things happened before in elder mythology. So creationists have to entertain the idea that, hey, we can't fake all these fossils, all these radiometric results, everything we've ever found all around the world, all uniformly, consistently corroborating the evolutionary position, in favor of the idea that whoever made up this fable was absolutely correct on everything, even when the Bible got it wrong. When the Bible says all throughout that the world is flat, for example, when in Job, God himself describes the earth as being explicitly flat, as it takes the shape of clay under a seal. That's a flat disc. So again, we have, if you cared about truth, if you cared about reason, if you were logical at all, you would start to understand that, hey, I've got this fairy tale, because it's literally a fairy tale. It's got magical enchantments and cursed fruit and blessings and animals that talk and act like people, all that shit. That's a literal fairy tale. It's a fable with a moral. I've got this. I've got Aesop's fables here. And I'm going to say that that's right. And the entirety of reality is wrong. Even though the fable contradicts itself constantly, and reality never does. Reality constantly corroborates the same fucking details over and over again.
Yeah. What about the situation where you get like this sort of new age theologians and intelligent religious people who say, you know what, evolution is true, it's a fact, but only on the micro level. I understand things are adapting, but I'll never see a mosquito turning into a cow.
Again, we have to get into the phylogeny challenge there. They want to use this notion of kinds, which is my favorite lie that the creationists tell, in an attempt to make sure that they don't understand. They're cultivating a misunderstanding. So they lie to themselves about what evolution is. They specifically lie about what macroevolution is, so that they end up with some strange cross between separated clades, cultivating a misunderstanding. And then they don't take correction. When you point out that mosquitoes are protostomes and that a cow is a deuterostome, and how far back in time those were separated, these are pre-Cambrian now, right? They don't care. They're not trying to understand. They're trying not to understand. They're deliberately trying not to understand so that they can believe. So how is that any different than just lying to yourself and others? It really does come down to fact versus fantasy, truth versus falsehood.
A question here from one of the channel supporters. Thank you, Option Select. And, it's the argument about, well, faith, science is also kind of faith, because we don't know really quantum
I
mechanics
hate
really
this
happen.
fucking argument. The believers are the ones with the faith. Those who have no faith have no faith. We don't believe. Faith is a belief that is not based on evidence. I have evidence. I don't have belief. I will weigh multiple hypotheses to see which one is better supported, and I can still entertain possibilities when they exist. I do not have a conviction to believe one thing over another, no matter what. That's what faith is all about, pretending to know things you don't know, that no one even can know. Stop pretending as if those who do not have faith have faith. That's your fucking problem. That's your major fuck up. Stop pushing it onto me. I won't share it.
Oh, I completely agree. It just the angle, Option Select is an atheist, but he's saying there are some believers who would say, well, those who believe in the scientific method, they have to use some kind of faith because they don't handle the stuff themselves, so they have to trust someone else. That's
Excuse me. Excuse me. I run a paleontology, not paleontology, a phylogeny website. We've been compiling data on this for years. Unfortunately, it's been down since the Ukraine war. So, and I don't know how we're going to get it back online without an influx of money. Our engineer is Ukrainian, and so and so our whole thing went down. While we were building, I think, the 6th database, because the amount of the volume of data that we put into this, it's the biggest phylogeny archive in the world ever.
Wow.
Hands down. Yeah. Then that was the problem. That's why 5 different databases collapsed. They couldn't. We tried to integrate 1.3 million extant species onto the several tens of thousands of extinct species that we already had, manually integrated, and it just came down. So now we're trying to figure out how we're going to get that back up online, get that functioning again with a new database this time, because the old one couldn't handle it. But so I'm going through the peer-reviewed journals on each of these things. I myself, I put tens of thousands of species into this thing myself by looking at the peer-reviewed material on Fossil Works and a number of other peer-reviewed sites. I've done paleontology myself in the different locations that I was just talking to you about. I have done it in the lab, and I have done it in the field. I have worked with the people who do radiometric dating. I've worked with a number of different people that have different specialties, and while I don't actually walk into their specialties, I'm well enough acquainted to know what they're talking about so that I don't have to just blindly trust what authorities say, because science doesn't have authorities. They have experts, but no authorities. An authority is when you say something and it's true because you said it. But it doesn't matter who said what. We can call out anybody who gets it wrong. And we don't care who it is. You get it wrong. I don't care if you're the professor, you're president of university, whatever the fuck. You get it wrong, we'll show it.
And, contrasting the two methods, we all know God acts in mysterious ways, as a father. But it's not a cult. What you're doing, anybody can have access to that information if they want to dedicate some time and actually study it. So access is granted. It's not like it's for only certain people. It's a secret that we're keeping here. Plus, it works. All these sciences sort of eventually, turn up into technologies that the faithful, unapologetically will use and benefit from and still deny science.
Yeah, indeed.
So, what's the future looks like? What is the new generation in the United States? And are there is like a movement where people are curious and wanting to know more? Or there is that extreme resistance where young people wanting to know more, but on the other side, you've got other people who are creationists who would do whatever they can to block this endeavor?
Well, there's a question in the chat which parallels what you're saying right now. Somebody said, what do you say to those people who say that I believe that fossils exist? I have to believe that they exist because they've never handled them with my own hands or
Yeah.
whatever. Get these creationists to join your local paleontological group because they do field trips. You will find shit. They know where the stuff is that you can find. There's a place, there's a Cretaceous Beach that I went to, which is on the border of Texas and Oklahoma. One of the tributaries of the Red River cut into this side thing, created a little canyon and cut through all of the Cenozoic strata, cut down to the Cretaceous, and it got to a beach area. Now, when you study geology, historical geology, they show you how to recognize a increase or the receding beach versus an encroaching beach. How to recognize, because these things wane and recede over and over again, and there's ways to show further to the north of this, say, it's all going to be terrestrial, and further to the south at this level, it's all going to be marine. Things are obvious, right? And then at the shore, you have thousands and thousands of shells of a particular type, and in this case, they had thousands of ammonite shells, where all these ammonites would, like, when they die, they all end up floating to the edge of the beach and piling up on top of each other. And then at the same time, you've got footprints and other things going on in the terrestrial side and so forth. So we know that it's not a great flood kind of a thing. But there are places that are like this where you know where the fossils are. They're easy for even beginners to find. And you can't fake that. There's no way. God did not create fossils to fool people, nor to test their faith. If God knows everything, then he doesn't need to test anything, does he? So either God doesn't exist at all, or if he did, then he created the process of fossilization to show how things really happened, not the way they happened in the storybooks written by men.
Mm-hmm.
Because the believers will tell us, well, you're going to believe man's word or God's word. Excuse me. Man's word is the ones in your fucking Bible. God's word, if there was one, is in the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
The fossils are God's word. The fables, that's man.
So you don't read. I mean, it is this sort of a situation where you're saying I cannot assert the non-existence of a God? Could there be still something?
Literally, God is not even a possibility to consider. In order to say whether something is possible, you can't just say anything is possible, because we know that many things are not possible. Right? Monkeys are not going to fly out of my ass. The cow cannot jump over the moon. There's just no way. It's not just that it's improbable. That's impossible. So we can't just say that anything is possible. In order to say whether something is possible, there has to be a precedent or a parallel or a verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. Something that shows us, well, yeah, if this is true, then this other thing could be true also, so forth. We don't have that for God. God is nothing but impossibilities compiled atop other impossibilities. Let's start with the disembodied mind, which is already nonsense. And how it's not magic, but everything about it is magic. What do you wish things to come into? You wish for things to come true, so they do? Really? Wishes come true. That's your science, is it? That's not possible either. Show me that it is possible. Show me that you can speak things into. Show me that somebody, anybody, anywhere can speak things into existence. Oh, that's just microevolution. Okay, fine. Show me micro-creation then, without pulling a rabbit out of a hat. I think that's about the best you can do.
It's very funny you said that. I remembered our Quran classes where I used to work with you on Talal, when we used to look at the Quran. There was the alleged claim by God, Allah, that if he wills something to exist, he just says the magic words, exist in it. But not once in his creation, he did actually that. He would create man from dust and mud and all clay and all that sort of shit, and angels from light and devils from. He actually uses always material. He can never conjure out of nothing. So it seems to me the claim is void.
One of the other things I noticed that amuses me is how creationists will use evolution as an excuse to argue against creationism when it is inconvenient for them to adhere to what their own storybooks are saying.
Mhm.
So Adam and Eve are the first couple, according to the Bible, right? Does God made Adam and Eve, and we're all supposed to be, we all have the curse of original sin because the sins of our forefathers, whatever. So we're all ancestors of Adam, except when Cain went to the land of Nod. And then suddenly the bullshit story is that, well, God created other people, or those other people evolved. And so not everybody is descended from Adam. Where the fuck that come from? That's not even allowed in the storybook. A better example, there is only one kind apart from humans that God that the story that the Bible Genesis gives specific details about, creating the first one from which all of the others came, right? Now, so the creationists will argue that evolution must be a thing in order to save their precious flood myth, because they know that you can't fit every species that ever existed onto the flood. I mean, onto the ark, right? So they invented this notion of kinds. So now whatever is the progenitor of a kind will evolve all of the different subsets of that kind, right? So now we don't need 15 million different species. Now we can just start with 1,400, say, and we can evolve everything after that. Well, we know from the storybook that Adam and Eve are the first couple, so that it starts with those two people. And there's one other kind that starts with a specific story about it, and that's where God created the serpent. The serpent was supposed to be that the descendants of the serpent were going to bruise man's heel, and then man was going to step on his. I can't. What they were going to do to injure this? They're going to have this enmity.
Yes.
Between humans and snakes. So from Adam and Eve to the first serpent, now all of the children of men and then the descendants of the serpent, they're all going to have this relationship throughout all time. Okay, well, that means that it started with one lineage of snakes. And God, the curse was that God took it, that God made it so it had to crawl on its belly all the rest of its days. And it has to eat dust, which is another funny thing about it. But I mean, when you read into all the particulars of it, okay, so this is the origin of snakes. We all accept this is the origin of snakes until you start looking at the phylogeny of snakes and realizing how much evolution there is that you have to accept. And now the creationists will say, well, God made lots of snakes. Did he? The story says the serpent was cursed above all cattle, above all other beasts of the field, everything, because it had to crawl on its belly all the rest of its days. Does that sound like that serpent was surrounded by a whole bunch of different types of serpents? No. That's another bullshit story. They know their story is bullshit, but they have to preserve the folklore anyway. And it's funny. Thing I don't understand. When you know it's a lie and you have to defend it even when it's no damn good.
It's funny how the serpent itself, I think evolution seems to be the order of the day that is even penetrating our storytelling, because later on Christianity saw that the serpent, the shiny one, is Lucifer, but in Judaism it's nothing to do with Lucifer whatsoever.
Yep, it was never supposed, and it can't be. Satan can't be the serpent in the garden, because the first time that Satan is mentioned by name in the Hebrew Bible is in a story chronologically after the Genesis account, and it specifically says that Satan is walking. Well, Genesis said that he was going to have to crawl on his belly all of the rest of his days, right? And they said, well, so where does it say that the serpent in the garden was supposed to be Satan? Oh, that says that in Revelations. Oh, no. Revelations is the last book of the New Testament. We're talking about the first book of the Old Testament. These are not the same authors. They're not the same concept. And when it says that old serpent, It doesn't mean that old serpent, because this one, when in Revelations, has 7 heads, which I think, if you're going to be talking about the serpent being the forerunner of all serpents, how many serpents have 7 fucking heads? You think that's a detail that maybe they would throw into the story if that's what they meant? No. And then there's the other thing. Satan is a serpent with 7 heads standing on the beach. How the fuck is he standing? He's supposed to be crawling on his belly all the rest of his days. And then, what it says, it calls him a serpent, so that must be that old serpent. Okay, well then let's go to the middle of the book then. Let's look at Jesus talking to the Pharisees. He calls them the sons of Satan, and he calls them, what is it, a pit of vipers or something like that. I can't remember which translation it is. But he calls them serpents and says that they're all the sons of Satan. Does that mean they are serpents? Does that mean they are the sons of Satan? Does that mean that Satan is a snake and so are the Pharisees? No. Just like it doesn't mean that if the Pharisees were not in the garden, and neither is the Revelations one, but what was, according to the story, that was a snake. That's all it was.
And for a snake to suggest that the punishment for a snake is to crawl on its belly, I think Ricky Gervais made that sort of joke in one of his stand-up comedies. It wasn't then actually a snake, then it was more like a lizard.
Yeah, well, snakes are a subset of lizards. But what I love with that is when you look at the phylogeny of snakes, you've got every aspect of evolution that any creationist tries to deny. There's throughout the phylogeny of snakes, you have transitional species, you have vestigial features, you have beneficial mutations. And if you accept what the Bible clearly says, that this is the origin of snakes, and now we're going to have all the various derivations, and you want to say, okay, well, how many snakes were on the ark? Well, maybe there's only one kind, okay? And you want to evolve all the different ones? Well, they're going to be evolving from the garden from this one lineage. This one lineage of snake produces all the other ones. And that means that we have all of these different aspects of evolution. I did a 3-part series on this, exploring the evolution of snakes. I call it Ophidia. Look it up. Anybody wants to see it. But
I guess the last part that I want to discuss before I think we're gonna sort of close in the next 15 minutes, guys. So if you want to throw a couple of questions, but now we go to an area which is always gets sort of confused with evolution. Is like, okay, well, I'll accept all of that. Tell me how it all began then. And we go into suddenly abiogenesis, where they kind of know by now. So 2 things that they would use by now: T = 0, which is what happens before the Big Bang, the frontier of science, and how's the first cell evolved. And they know for a fact that these are 2 developing sciences still sort of maybe in their younger generation, and they'll attack you, and it's a classic argument from ignorance. I don't know how this has happened, and therefore, and you can't explain it, then God still prevails.
Okay, well, let's look at this then. There's another analogy that will help people understand this, I think. Imagine a series of dominoes. Now you can look back over all the dominoes are lined up, right, like you would expect in any. You've seen the domino effect, right? So we're going to be looking at all these dominoes standing in a line, and then you get far enough back, and then you realize that they're all laying down on top of each other at the stage, and then you realize you're looking at this in very, very, very slow motion. So at one point, you will see where a domino is being forced toward another domino. Hasn't touched it yet because we're watching in very, very slow motion, but you can tell. This domino is going to hit this one, which is going to knock it into this one, and it's knocking into this one, because that's evidently what happened all the way back. So we can tell that this is happening. This is our understanding of evolution. We're watching how evolution is illustrated in the fossil record. And then some ninny says, well, you can't prove that the dominoes are knocking down each other because you don't know how the first one fell over. Does it matter? If it was the finger of God or if it was a gentle breeze, what the fuck does it matter? We know that this pattern remains regardless how the first one fell over. But the anti-logical argument that they're using is you can't prove that the dominoes are falling if you can't prove how the first one fell. Doesn't make any difference. Now, if you want to talk abiogenesis, I can. I've compiled a list of studies that go into a lot of the detail about that. We still don't know everything. We never will know everything, but we know a whole lot more than creationists are willing to admit.
Yeah, there are some people now saying, like, I'll give you that evolution is true, but how do you get the inanimate to be animate? This is their issue. How does chemistry turn into biochemistry, and from biochemistry go into biology?
There's a lot of animated chemistry that isn't biological.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are self-replicating and that create the type of reactions look very much like living organisms, in movement. But that doesn't. The idea of going from animate to inanimate, or inanimate to animate, it's trying to oversimplify, and nothing is as simple minds sometimes need it to be.
I don't know if you've ever come across Edwin Schrodinger's, the cat guy.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called What is Life? And instead of the classical Mrs. Green, the 7 characteristics of a living being, which is way too convoluted, he's saying, what if life evolved in a very, what we call a living thing, had only 2 things: making copies of itself and, using energy to do whatever it does. And that's it at that point.
Well, there's another one, Jeremy England, a physicist who is also a rabbi. He believes in God. He believes that God created, but he does not believe that God said abracadabra and poofed life out of inanimate objects. He understands through physics, through the through the second law of thermodynamics in specific. He recognizes how the second law actually requires life to develop because it's the most efficient means of dissipating heat.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So there's a lot of the biochemistry can begin that simply. And it's a whole lot more complicated than I'm making it out to be, because if you study anything at all, you will find an enormous amount of complexity in it, no matter what the fuck it is, whatever the topic is. You study it enough, you're going to find an awful lot that most people don't know, or that everything becomes more complex. It
is a really interesting way to look at it, because in physics, that's true. All elements behave to conserve energy and to stabilize. And if you take this all the way to chemistry, which the chemical elements do exactly that, and life is only nothing but a manifestation of the very same situation, where you're trying to conserve energy and provide a system that keep the information, like in the lipid in the cell. That actually makes complete sense. I like that.
And it's important to note that there are a lot of people like Rabbi England who, when they're trained in genetics or physics or just textbook biology, there's a lot of people who consider themselves traditional theists, whether Catholic or Pentecostal or Orthodox or rabbinical, and they know that they can't support the Bible as a infallible, God-breathed word of God kind of thing.
Yeah.
And how they compartmentalize their belief, I don't really care. But creationists just have to flat out lie to themselves.
Yeah.
And that's the big issue that I have.
I mean, we've seen some signs. I mean, it looks like there might be an element of psychological need. Probably some people are not cut to face the truth, and it's too hard for them, and they would rather the consolation of religion. But they then create their own God in their own image, which is the God of Spinoza. Because the God of Spinoza is really not a God. He's not even conscious of himself. He's just the rules of physics. So I think Spinoza was quite a genius in that way, because if humanity insist on having a God, here is a toothless and clawless God that it's one with the universe. Here's your God. Take that. And that became the God of Einstein and all these smart people, because maybe some people are too afraid to admit that we're alone and we are responsible for everything.
There are people that I've heard the notion that either there is a God or there isn't, and either option is terrifying. I don't see that. You know, if there was a God and it's the Christian God, that would be horrific. If it was the Abrahamic God, that would be horrific. If there was a God, it'd be a better God than that one. It wouldn't be the Abrahamic God. It would be a better God. It would have to be. But I just can't see a God fitting the universe, much less being needed. There's no need for one. There's no. I don't. It's how can you miss someone you've never met? You know, for example, there isn't a possibility of a God. There's no need for a God. Why are we wasting our time talking about this imaginary thing? You know,
every time you apply Occam razor and you remove God, everything works. Everything.
Yeah, and that was how it was with me when I struggled with theism as a young man. When I finally realized that I didn't believe in God anymore, because the universe did not make sense until I stopped trying to shoehorn a God into it.
Yeah, including the dilemmas, you know, like the problem of evil, problem of divine hiddenness. All of that are explained away. You know, once you remove God, it all makes sense. We probably will end up with this note here. I know you continue to, of course, guys, just a reminder, please go to the description of the video. You'll find Aron's Wikipedia page, his work in biology, as well as his YouTube channel.
Please go to patreon.com/ARONRA, or at the bottom of any of my videos, there's also a PayPal link. Things are pretty tight, and this is how I make my living. So I need all the support I can get. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we would love to see that project resurrected, because it's a huge one. And I wish a governmental body sort of pick it up or help with that, because that's such an important endeavor.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be linked with Wikipedia for a bit. The problem with Wikipedia is that their phylogenies don't match each other. Yeah, and so because when my system went down and I couldn't just source the system that we built, I had to start using Wikipedia's. You know, when I needed illustrated clades to show people. But in every one of my phylogeny videos, and I've done several of them, I've discovered inconsistencies and things that need to be corrected in all of them. So, and that's personally frustrating.
That's for sure. Well, Aron, I mean, I'd like to really thank you so much. You've always been gracious with your time, and I don't know many people who can deliver scientific information with such a great storytelling and sense of humor and sincere concern for the human condition and how are we going to live going forward. So if you'd like to say some final words before we finish.
I think I've said everything. I don't have a final word. Please support me if you can.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. And next conversation is actually going to be with your pal. Aron is going to be with Seth Andrews. I'm going to talk about Christianity, because I'm going to be addressing part of to the Coptic Egyptians. 15 million of them were living in very difficult situation in Egypt. So thank you very much once again.
You're going to be talking with me and Seth about that? Did I hear that right?
No. It was with Seth.
Okay,
with Seth.
gotcha.
Yeah, and I've got Matt Dillahunty coming as well. So we've got a few. At some point, it would be nice to actually have the is it the unholy trinity, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah. That would be lovely, because that's going to be fire. If we do that at some point, I'm going to have to sort of coordinate that. But once again, thank you very much, guys. In the description of the video, all Aron Ra's information there. Please go and support him, and please show some love. And thank you so much.